Hello and welcome back to my channel. Rarely we'll do cosplay things, sometimes we'll tell ghost stories, and lately we've mostly been talking about atheist witchery, and today's going to be another one of those days. I actually would like to talk to you today about the implications of believing in ghosts and whether or not you can still enjoy ghost stories even if you don't believe in the physical possibility of ghosts. There are a few YouTubers who have already done videos on this. I hope that mine is different enough that it will have a place out there in the internet. Just know that these are my views and I'm not coming after anybody else for their views. There are a variety of views about supernatural things and this is just my take. And so you just have to know, like, I've been doing a lot of notes and research way before I watched anybody else's video. Oh, we have a visitor. Oh. Okay. This is gonna make this a little trickier. Hi. Before I get started in the story, I do have to make a quick comment that we have reached a little bit of a milestone today. Yeah, I'm a child, but still, that's about 100 more subscribers than I ever expected to have on this channel. So thank you, and thanks for sticking around, and I hope that you find what you need here. And I'm glad that we found each other, and I hope that we can hang out and keep having these chats. Maybe when we reach 200 subscribers, I'll do a giveaway, not because I'm trying to incentivize anybody to subscribe to this channel, but because I am actually a potter and I haven't been selling for like a good year. And so I have some inventory that maybe it would be fun to find a new home for. Are you biting me? Why are you biting me? You're so mean. Why are you such a jerk? Okay, I'm gonna front load this talk by reminding everybody that I am an atheist and a witch, and I am a skeptical atheist who does not believe in anything supernatural. This means that I use science to understand the world around me. I'm not talking about pseudoscience that sounds an awful lot like science because it uses all the science buzzwords, but actually doesn't contain very much science at all. I'm actually speaking about peer-reviewed science in established journals. How can I be a practicing witch without believing in the supernatural? It's called the open label placebo effect, and there are a couple of videos on the front of this series that if you'd like to hear me say placebo 100 times, then those are the videos for you. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I have a passion for the paranormal. I love everything spooky. I have actually been obsessed with ghosts since I heard my first true first-hand account ghost story when I was growing up at one of my parents' dinner parties. And ever since then I had been on the hunt to find a ghost. Like, that's all I wanted, was to come face to face with a real ghost. At the end, about a mile away from our house, if you walked all the way down a dirt road, you would get to a very old rural graveyard, and so I would often hang out in that graveyard. There were a couple of times when I walked down there with my sleeping bag and I lit some candles and stayed all night in that graveyard, and I can tell you when I woke up in the morning I was soaking wet from dew, and I was disappointed because I didn't see anything spooky at all, not even little light orbs or any voices or anything. At the other end of the road there was an old farmhouse that was sort of half burnt out, and an elderly couple had died there from carbon monoxide poisoning. And I often got my friends to go there with me, and we would sort of put seances together. This was predating the internet, and I wasn't about to check out books from the library about seances, so we had no idea what we were doing. I think we had just seen it in a few movies, and so we were trying to fake it, and nothing happened. It was very disappointing. We often had Ouija boards at slumber parties at supposedly very haunted friends' houses, and nothing ever happened then. It was just a lot of disappointment. Okay, so we've already gotten into a kind of a rambly mess. So to try to get this video to be somewhat organized, we're going to lump this into 3 categories. And the first category is going to be, what is a ghost? It's a common held belief that a ghost is something that's left over after a human dies. So like you pass away and there's this sort of byproduct of a human life. You are conscious, and some part of that consciousness, ow, is left over after you die. We've estimated that about 110 people have died on this planet. So that would be a lot of residual something. You also have to consider that humans tend to clump together, and so if the spirits sort of stay in the same area where the person died, then we're talking about actually a very small percentage of the earth. You know, we don't have ghosts floating around in the middle of the ocean. There's not going to be very many ghosts, you know, in Antarctica. So we're talking about mostly inhabitable areas, you know, so you think about Europe and how many people have lived there, like that would just be ghosts stacked on top of ghosts, stacked up on top of ghosts. And also you have to consider that as the world population explodes, that's just going to be more ghosts. Like you think about the 7 billion people on the planet right now, like that's going to be a lot of ghosts. It's also really strange when you consider how many infants perished before, you know, modern medicine. And so, you know, how sentient are baby ghosts? Are there just like little baby ghosts lying all over the ground everywhere and we can't see them? Do baby ghosts float around like other ghosts do? If so, do they not have proper neck support and their heads are just sort of flopping around? Okay, I know what you're thinking. Not everybody turns into a ghost. That's a pretty common explanation. What kind of things might turn somebody into a ghost? Maybe a ghost has unfinished business. But really, isn't unfinished business fairly common? Like, not very many people are ready to go. Like, I'm sure a lot of people might want to stick around for their unfinished business. And oftentimes in ghost stories, the unfinished business is pretty mundane anyway. Like it's telling your loved ones that you know you still care about them or that you're proud of them or something. Like pretty much everybody, I would think, would want to whoosh back in to do that. So now we're still talking about a ton of ghosts. Okay, so maybe you're in the camp where ghosts only occur when violent energy is released because of a terrifying, gruesome death. Forgive me, I'm not Freakonomics, but there's about 7 billion people on this planet, and 0.72% of them will be murdered. So if we're thinking about ghosts that come from a violent act, then we're still talking about the 7 billion people on the planet right now. 50 million of them will become ghosts. That's still a lot of ghosts. Like, that's still 50 million ghosts wandering around harassing people on a daily basis. And really, doesn't that mean that in 70 years we're gonna have like another 50 million ghosts? This is not a sustainable model. Like, there's just too many people for ghosts to not have ever been documented or detected by modern instruments. And that brings me to my second observation. What are ghosts made out of? So many people think that the ghosts are made out of a residual energy, and that energy sort of floats around and causes you to have an upset stomach, or causes you to see a flash of light. And in this case, a lot of people will cite the first law of thermodynamics, which is the conservation of energy, where energy cannot be created or destroyed. And that sounds extremely scientific, but in this context, it's such pseudoscience, because really energy as defined by science isn't a physical thing. Like, it's not, there's no such thing as pure energy. In sci-fi movies, they always have like this core of pure energy, and there's this sort of plasma light floating around. And so that's what we think of. We think of, oh, energy is floating around all the time. But energy is just the ability to move something. Like, it's just an act. It's the way physicists describe work. It can be transferring from one thing to another when something's moving. Like if I push a box across the floor, and the friction of the floor causes the box to slow down, and therefore the energy goes from being kinetic, moving, to heat because of the friction causes the heat of the box. So it can change, and it can move, and it can transfer, and it can be stored. That's true. Like, I store my energy in glycogen, but like, storing energy is pretty complicated, right? Like, how long did it take us to figure out lithium batteries for your cell phone? Like, still, storing energy is extremely complex, and you have to have a medium to store that energy in. You can't just store that energy in nothing. Okay, so ghosts can't be energy. if they use energy, that means they have to store energy. So that means that they're a medium that stores energy. And if that's the case, there is a medium that stores energy that exists, and no instrumentation that exists in science today can detect it. Not even the Large Hadron Collider. We're not talking about a little bit of energy that's being stored. This medium that is a ghost could store so much energy that it's going to produce an action. It's going to have to produce enough energy to put on a pretty big show, big enough for humans to be able to detect it. Because you have to remember that of animals in the animal kingdom, our senses are pretty dull. Like, we can't hear very many types of waves of sound. We can't even see infrared. And our smell and taste is pretty terrible. So this ghost has to store enough energy to be able to create, seemingly from nowhere, like these big shows that are gonna like spook somebody out. So that's gonna be a fairly complicated medium, right? And when it's not producing the effect, then it can't be detectable at all. So you got to think about like all the experiments that are happening right now with extremely sensitive equipment all over the world, and that equipment has never picked up anything like this medium that I'm describing, or these bursts of energy. So could there be a medium that's produced after our death that houses and stores energy to create these shows that spook us out and make us terrified? Like, possibly, but if it's true and we discover it, it's really going to make us rewrite all of our existing physics. I mean, if I'm thinking about this like undetectable force of energy, like I'm thinking maybe it would minutely be detectable by really sensitive instrumentation, but would it be powerful enough to slam your cabinets open and closed? Like, I don't know. That's a pretty big ask. I mean, you do contain energy, and it's a lot of stored potential energy. And when you die, you do transfer that energy. Like when the bacteria are eating you, it's going to create a lot of heat. You're going to be fertilizer, and that's how you're going to dispel your energy. Like, there's not really anything that exists that can transfer your energy into something that's going to be like traveling and outside of your body. I mean, that would be pretty amazing. So when you die, do you transfer into disappearing and reappearing mist? It would definitely be detectable through instrumentation that we currently have. And if not, like I said, we'd have to completely rewrite our understanding of particle physics. Okay, so that brings us to chapter 2. Why do people see ghosts? If ghosts are physically not possible, then why are they so common? There's ghost sightings in every culture, all around the world, constantly throughout time. So if ghosts aren't real, why do we have so many first-hand accounts of ghosts? So let's think of a situation where you're going to try to find a ghost. You're probably going to go to a place that's very haunted. You want to look for somewhere that's desolate, that maybe hasn't been inhabited for a long time. And you're probably going to want to do it with a group of friends. You're also going to come into it with an attitude that you want to find that ghost. Like, you're going to come into it really open-minded and maybe even a little biased. See, and you already know what I'm thinking. Like, this is an uninhabited old place, so there's a high chance of carbon monoxide and also maybe some toxic mold. And these things are going to give you symptoms of a spooky, spooky ghost, like maybe a pressure on your chest. Carbon monoxide can even give you hallucinations. Something you might not have thought of, though, is memory conformity. There was an experiment done where a group of people watched a video of a supposed psychic using mental powers to bend a key. And in the control group, everyone just watched the video together. And in one experimental group, there was a plant in the group that was very skeptical. And while the key was on screen, he would say, "Oh, no, I don't think that key is even bending. Like, this is impossible." And then the other experiment group, there was a plant in the group that was very much won over. And so that plant said things like, "Oh my gosh, I can see the key bending. Can you see the key bending?" And so at the end of the experiment, when people were interviewed and they were asked to think back to the video and remember, did the key actually bend or not? In the control group, it was kind of split. And in the skeptical plant group, everybody was very positive that they didn't see the key bend. And then in the group where the plant told them that the key was bending, Everyone was very sure, like they look back in their memory and they remember distinctly that that key was bending, because their memory wants to conform, because conformity is our survival as humans. Like if you don't conform in the human setting, then you're gonna, be left to die. So conforming is a very important part of survival. Conformity is powerful enough to make you alter your memory. So your senses and your memory are very easily fooled. Remember, human senses are the lamest in the animal kingdom, and we can make a lot of mistakes. And if you're in a group of people and somebody hears something and, spooks you out, then later when you're remembering it, you will have a real memory of hearing something. Like, it's not a false memory. It's a real memory. It's really there. Hi, Bowser. Are you going to come and bother me during my video now? He looks a little rough. He's actually spent last week in a cone because he had eye surgery. And now he's wearing his little jacket because he's been cold. And he just had a wrestle fight with his brother, so his hair is a little messed up. So forgive me, but it looks like I'm like a very bad mom. But he's usually not in such poor shape. So even if you have a very first-hand account with a ghost, that doesn't necessarily mean that ghosts are real. Sorry. Eyewitness testimony is some of the most flimsy proof of an event happening. Also, besides carbon monoxide poisoning or suggestion from other people, a lot of ghost sightings happen at night when you're in bed or like when you're having a nap. And those can all be explained away by a phenomenon known as sleep paralysis. So anytime you hear somebody tell a ghost story where a shadow visits them in the night, that's pretty classic sleep paralysis stuff. Is it any less terrifying when it happens to you? Like, no. It's absolutely super terrifying. Which brings us to chapter 3. If ghosts aren't real, why do we still love ghosts? So I'm happy you're still with me through this whole video. It hasn't probably been very enjoyable. Like, skepticism sometimes is not very satisfying. I hope it hasn't spoiled your Halloween. And I'm not here to rain on your parade or to steal away your love and affection for ghosts. Like I said, I've loved ghosts even when I was a very young child. I've really worked hard, like my whole life, to try to have a ghost experience. And I feel very robbed that I've never had a one-on-one encounter with a ghost. When I was in college, I still love ghosts. And we would go out to all the haunted places in our town. When I got my first job, the first thing I did was I sought out all the haunted places in that new community. I've spent the night in one of the most haunted places in the world. I've hung out in an old haunted jail. I've hung out in an old burnt out church that was supposedly haunted. I've really slowed down on my ghost hunting, mostly because it involves really rough camping, which I'm not a huge fan of because I like indoor plumbing and heat. I love getting together with people and getting them to share their paranormal stories with me. I love it when people share paranormal stories online. I scour YouTube for the best spooky stories because, ghost stories are stories, and stories are such a big part of being a human. It's what binds us together. It's how we transfer our experiences to each other. It's how we connect. It's how we connect to each other. It's how we connect to our past. When somebody's telling you a paranormal story, it's one of their most vulnerable times. And I think it makes it a really special connection between you and that person. So it's spooky time, and go collect all those spooky stories and listen to the spooky stories and share the spooky stories. But just be careful that you don't trade in your science for pseudoscience. We have to find the value in these things without losing what makes our society better than it's ever been before. Our scientific understanding of the world is extremely important. It's given us the quality of life that we have now. So yeah, we need to share our traditions and our stories and connect with people and get all ghosty and spooky. But we shouldn't embrace the pseudoscience of it. Like, mistrusting science has caused a lot of problems for us in today's society. Like, thinking that a quick Google search and all of a sudden we understand things better than professionals and scientists. Like, that's not great. So enjoy your spooky stories, but remember that they're just stories. Yeah, so I hope you have a really good Halloween. I hope you hear some good stories. I hope you have some spooky times. You'll have to let me know what sort of things that you do to try to find ghosts. Anyway, so thank you for letting me be rambly at you, and this was fun, and we'll do it again some other time. Bye!